biggest myth is, I'll pivot away from what I previously said. We'll say this is the second biggest myth. The first biggest myth is hardware has to be hard. And hopefully we've solved that. The second biggest myth is that inventions come from engineers. And I don't understand why the average person thinks that. The reality is inventions come from people who are angry. That's where they come from. Someone who has dealt with a problem in their industry, and they're so frustrated that this sticky spot, this Velcro-like thing is in their path, that they've decided to invent something to work their way through that. That's where inventions come from.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Expert. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Justin Evans. And Justin, we're going to be talking about a few different topics, which include as you're bootstrapping a business, how to not give up equity or to give up the least that you can, and building a business from scratch, and also figuring out how to work with Chinese factories as day labor, and understanding factory jobs as a white collar worker, and prototyping and getting it done fast with high quality, and a lot of great points of conversation. And with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Justin.
Thank you, Devin. It's good to see you. I haven't been on your podcast for a couple of years, so it's good to see you again.
Yep, absolutely. And just as a reminder to the audience, so Justin was one of our first guests on the Inventive Journey, so which is our sister podcast. So if you haven't, or if you want to go check out his full journey and some of his or check out that Inventive Journey episode. And but for those that haven't had a chance to check out the episode, maybe just take a quick minute or two and introduce yourself to the audience.
So my name is Justin Eugene Evans, and I'm an American. I spent about the last 15 years living in Wisconsin. Started a hardware technical business in my one-car garage. Grew it into an international company and sold it for $31 million about 2.5 years ago. And now I operate my dream company. It's called Evans Works. And we've built our first factory, which you see behind me. It's called the Evans Works Creative Lab. And this is sort of a prototyping facility on steroids. And I'm now in Cape Town and Taiwan. Those are the two places that I split my time between.
Awesome. No, great introduction, and sounds like a fun, exciting business to be in. And so with that as an introduction, maybe just diving a bit into the topics at hand. One of the ones that I liked, and it almost kind of flashed back a little bit to our original episode with the Inventive Journey, which is, the balance that a lot of times businesses have of bootstrapping versus getting investors versus giving up equity versus keeping equity. And it's kind of always what feels like competing interests, and, kind of trying to figure out what you should or shouldn't do, and what mistakes to make or what mistakes to avoid. So give us a little bit of your thoughts on, if you're bootstrapping a business, should you give up equity, or how do you avoid giving up equity?
No, hell no. You should hold on to as much of your equity as you can, as long as you can. And you should realize that the investor does not have your best interests at heart. And they use valuations. They pretend it's a science. It is not. It is at best a shell game played in the dirtiest subway station in a 1970s nightmare version of New York. And they're shuffling the little shells around, and you're the sucker. I feel very strongly about this. I made the decision 2 years ago, when I was essentially forced to sell the business that I loved and had incubated in my garage for over a decade. My wife and I made it a very strategic decision, and we decided that these people who had manipulated their way into our lives, we would let them win. We refer to it as the Queen's Gambit, and we deliberately gave up our queen so that we would have the capital to start our dream company. And I have only one financial partner in my new business, and he's my best friend. So his name, Jason Moore. He's one of the stars of Marvel's The Punisher. And he believed in me when there was no reason to believe in me. I had no patents. I'd never sold a piece of technology. And I still remember him sitting me down in his car just after he'd gotten his check for his third episode of The Punisher. And he said, I'm signing this over to you, and I wish I had more. And it got me into tears because of the deep passion that he had for what I was doing, and his faith that I would come through. So he's the only person who's going on this journey with me. So he's my only investor. My wife and I have put up about 95% of the capital. And there's moments it is absolutely panic inducing and fear inducing because I'm the bank. I make every mistake. I have to pay for the mistakes. And some of those mistakes are big. However, our company is now 2 years old. It became revenue neutral last week. And we have no debt, and we own 100% of it. And being in that position is so rare. It allows us now to focus on how do we grow the business, and we do not have to make an investor happy. We can do what's right for the company and what's right for our customers.
No, that's awesome. Now, kind of to follow up on just diving into that just a bit, which is, I know kind of a little bit what you alluded to. It's a lot of times it's easier said than done. Now, it depends on the business. If you're in a service-based business and you're going to go do, whether it's, hair cutting or, plumbing repair or, whatever that service may be, it makes it easier because your startup costs are low. In other words, a lot of it is taking out your own shingle, maybe getting an office, or a lot of times you can work from home and you're selling your time and your experience. Now it gets a bit more difficult as you're getting sometimes into more tangible or product-based or even software and some of those things where you can't just do it off of your own time and dime, but you have to actually get products made or prototyped, or you have to get, people that have expertise that you don't, or you have to invest in physical and tangible or products or equipment. All those tend to add up. And so when you get into that realm, other than if you have a big savings account that you can dip into, how do you go about maintaining that equity or not giving it up, but at the same time getting the business off the ground?
Our company's in a very different position than most. I don't think most people could start what we've started because, and we had explored building this in the United States, then Toronto, then Jamaica. We were ready to pull the trigger and build the first creative lab in Kyiv. And we saw students drilling with AK-47s in the square of the Kyiv Polytechnic Institute. And we deliberately held back and did not sign a lease. And 6 weeks later, Putin invaded. And so this has been a really difficult business to start. And I never could have convinced an investor to say that, because the whole concept of the Creative Lab is that we are redesigning the Industrial Revolution. This is a completely different way of thinking about how to do manufacturing. That's not an easy sell. And it's a very expensive startup because we've got to invest in a lot of machines. And then we have to make those machines do things they weren't necessarily intended to do. If I were to do it all over again, though, and I didn't have the resources I've been lucky enough to acquire through the sale of a former company, if I was starting from scratch, I'm 22 years old, I would go out of my way to start a business that does not require any startup capital. And I'd make that my revenue stream. Because if you've got cash coming in, here's another way to put it. There's two lies that we're told, particularly as Americans. The first lie most entrepreneurs ignore with ease, and that is you should get a job for security. Go do something you hate, do something that will kill your soul. Don't worry about that. What matters is security, and go get this job. Maybe you have no interest in accounting, but go be an accountant. And I had a parent who would say to me, you should just be a teacher. You should just be an attorney. You should do something. I'm like, I'm not built for those. That's not my passion. Most entrepreneurs can avoid that lie with ease. And most of the people you'll hire have completely and totally bought into that lie. And you have to understand that they're a security-driven person. But there's a second lie too. And that is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. That is equally as toxic and it's equally as wrong. I think a better way to look at this is much more nuanced. And it's do something that you hate if it will put enough capital in your bank account that you can then be the bank, and do that long enough that you can start to build the financial resources to be your own investor, because no investor is ever going to have your back. They always have their own intentions and their own objectives, and they aren't necessarily aligned with yours. And that very well could be as simple as starting a food truck. It could be as simple as doing haircuts out of your house. There's all sorts of ways to start a cash flow positive business that requires virtually no startup capital. You can become a millionaire selling donuts. I chose to do something crazy. I chose to say everything that had been wrong with my previous company. And I'm not talking about the investors now. I'm talking about the hell of trying to just get an object made. I mean, here's my latest invention. And so let's just take the extruded skin here, the aluminum skin. It took me 2.5 years to learn how to do this with ease, to get it to be the quality that I want, and to get it at the price point that I want. That's not what the Industrial Revolution was ever supposed to be. It's supposed to be easier than this. It's supposed to be as simple as going to FedEx office. And so that's what I decided to do, but that's capital intensive when you say we're going to make the FedEx office of factories.
No, I think that that makes sense. And I agree with you on both fronts. I mean, or on a lot of fronts. I think that, you know, the lie that you have to hate your job for your whole life isn't there one that you have to accept. But on the other hand, I think equally, as you said, when you're saying, hey, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Even if you find something you do love, you're still going to work a day in your life. It's still a lot of work. It's still a lot of effort. It's still hard. And it's still, you have plenty of sleepless nights and worries. It's just that you would also have a greater sense of enjoyment. But I like the idea that I think that sometimes people feel like, well, if I have a business, I have to go all in, I have to burn the ships or quit my job and, you know, throw caution in the wind. And I think, you know, almost taking that stepwise approach of get something that allows you to be financially stable so that as you're starting your business, as you're doing your side hustle or your second full-time job, that you're able to have that financial stability to let you pursue the business, keep the equity, but also give it enough runway to set it up for success. So I think that's a great piece of advice and some great takeaways. Now, one of the questions you started, oh, go ahead.
There's two great examples. Number one is the company BioWare, which is one of the top video game companies in the world. It was started by two medical doctors, and neither one of them had a passion for medicine. They were talked into becoming medical doctors by their parents. But luckily, by being medical doctors, they made more than enough capital, and they never bought into the myth that they had to live at the level of their income. So they chose to live middle class while they're making an incredible living, and they poured the delta of their income into their video game company, and that's why it's called BioWare. Another really good example would be Mike Richardson, who started Dark Horse Comics, which is the 4th largest publisher in the United States. He didn't start with a publishing company. He started with a comic book store, and it was the profits that he made from a single comic book store in Portland, Oregon, that allowed him to grow that. And that was called Pegasus Books at the time. And he was able to grow that into 2 or 3 Pegasus locations. And then he launched Dark Horse, which he just sold to DC Comics for $250 million. So I think it usually means that you need a grand strategy. And I am the first to admit I didn't have a grand strategy, not at first. There were too many times where I would jump into something because I loved it with all my heart, and I wasn't thinking through, how is an investor going to take advantage of me in this situation? Or how am I going to put myself in a position to easily be taken advantage of because I'm going to be so desperate for capital? And now this is the first time in my life I'm in a position where there's cash flow coming in with clients that come into the creative lab, and that pays the bills for the entire business, so that I can now finally focus on invention and bringing out my own technology without the need for additional capital of my own or additional capital from investors.
No, I think that definitely makes sense. And I like the examples. And I think that sometimes we we don't hear about those examples because you only hear about the people that put it all in, where the overnight success, and that's the
Yes.
1% that is successful, and you don't hear about the others that had they taken a different path, it would have been a different outcome. Now, switching gears just a little bit, but kind of along those things, one of the things that you guys help out with and do a lot of is prototyping and getting that initial concept to something more than just an idea, but also helping people do that on, I think, and putting words in your mouth that you can certainly correct, but doing it on a reasonable basis and helping people to do it at, in a good process and step. But if you're a business and you're just starting, or you're even more, we'll say even one step earlier, you're a solo guy, solo inventor, has a great idea, you do have that full-time maybe job or some savings that you're saying, hey, I don't want to quit my job now, but I do want to pursue this with the idea of hopefully turning the side hustle into a full-time or opportunity. And one of those first things is I want to take the idea and turn it into a prototype that I can make sure that it works and start to shop it around and get excitement in that. Kind of what are those initial steps to get into prototyping, and how do you do it so it doesn't break the bank?
That's a great question, Devin. We have a wide variety of clients here, and the thing they seem to share in common is an itch that they can't stop scratching. So we've had clients from the mining industry. We're working with a dentist. We're working with an optometrist on a new way of making prescription glasses. We're working with a liquid propane gas company that has a new LPG delivery system. And we're working with a evaporative water collector company that wants to solve water crises around the world. And every single one of these clients, the same thing that they all seem to share is that they understand their industry so well. They know what technology should exist for their industry, but they can't find an investor, or the investor wants too much equity, and they're trying desperately to scale this technology, this idea of theirs, up on their own. And so we sort of step in the middle of that, and we help them on every single step of the journey. So this can start with, they walk in the door and I've got a sketch. That's all I've got. Now, if they demonstrate they don't understand their industry, we find a way to end that relatively quickly. But that most of the time, the person is coming in, they are an absolute subject matter expert. And so that person will say, I've got a sketch, I can demonstrate how well I know my industry, and I have the barest of financial resources that I can pay for your services. Most of our clients are not wealthy, and they don't need to be. And once they've begun that journey with us, we take them on every single step of it, which means we start with conceptual design for the product. We walk them through color theory and figuring out what's their branding for their corporation. We can do logo design for them. We have partnerships with both local law firms and international law firms that can then register their IP. And then once that's all in place, the engineers start to get to work. And the engineers will do digital files of whatever it is that they're working on. They can do this remotely. It's amazing how much you can get done from your bedroom. And once they have approved a digital version of their invention, we even do simulations, really advanced simulations. And so they can say, well, I need to make sure that it'll pass IP67, or I need to make sure that it can handle this kind of a fall off of a second-story building, or I really need to understand the thermal energy that's coming out of the back, and if we've really handled the cooling correctly. Once we've done all that, we go, now it's time to make a prototype. And one of the things we walk them through happens right down there in row number 2. We have ordinary FDM printers. And the whole point of starting with an FDM print is that it's not as pretty as a resin print. It certainly doesn't look like a final product, but it's cheap and it's fast. And it keeps the costs down, as an inventor is now moving from the digital to a physical object that they can hold with their hands and make sure it fits in the palm of their hand right, it feels right, pieces rotate correctly. Once we've gone through that, we can final prototype products right here. In row 1, we've got metal printers, and we can print in titanium, steel, copper. Some of our other printers do wood, silicone, ceramic. And so we can actually physically make the final version of their demo unit. And at that point, send it to our office in Taipei, where it's broken back into its constituent pieces. And it goes to each of the factories that we have a relationship with. And we can go, okay, this company will make the extruded aluminum skin. This company will make the heat sink. This company will do the printed circuit board. And that allows a customer to go all the way from idea to prototype to demo unit, ready for mass manufacturing. And in my opinion, if a customer can get themselves all the way to that point, now they're in a position of power when they negotiate with an investor, because they're saying, I don't need you for research and development. I just need you to help scale up my company.
No, I think that's definitely makes sense, and is a good stepwise approach to going through things. Now, when you're going through, and I know this is a hard question to ask, and probably one where there isn't a perfect answer, but how do people even start to figure out how much a prototyping or kind of that process, or even the process that you just went through is going to cost them? In other words, hey, I do have a bit of money set aside, or I can have a monthly burn, but I don't have unlimited funds, and I don't have can't break the bank, or put everything on or in jeopardy. So how do you kind of anticipate or figure out what you should be setting aside, or what you should be anticipating to get to that point?
That's a great question. That's, I assume it's similar to your law firm. We always do a 30-minute consult for free because we want to get to know customer needs. And usually in 30 minutes, we can assess if an invention is real and if they really are a subject matter expert. And at that point, we present a budget to them. Our rates are $60 US an hour. And so one of the reasons that we chose to build here in South Africa is that I think of South Africa as the best R&D region of the planet that Americans have never heard of. It blows my mind. The average American doesn't even know that South Africa speaks English. And so you're dealing with 60 million human beings that speak English, watch American television shows, read American comic books. You can talk about things like, it's like a Star Trek transporter, and they know what you're talking about. Whereas if I were to say that in Mandarin, even if I could translate that, culturally, it wouldn't translate. And so it makes it much, much easier to communicate with our staff. And it allows Americans to get into a level of research and development that would cost them 10x if it was being done in Silicon Valley, about 4x if it was being done anywhere else in the United States, such as, say, Salt Lake City. And that makes it much more affordable. And we work at milestones with them. So we say, hey, to get to this point, this will be milestone number 1. And our estimate is that it'll be 15 hours. And then to get to milestone number 2, we think that's 25 hours. And that allows the customer to budget that as they go along. And they can always say to us, I've got enough in the bank for milestone 1, and then I'm going to need to pause for a little bit. That's not a problem. And we work through that with them so that they are never, ever in over their head financially as they're building their inventions.
No, I think that definitely makes sense, and I think that's a great approach. And I, as you mentioned, I'm a big believer in before they get in and have to spend a lot of money just for a consultation, only to be told that it's not the point that they can help, or it's going to be way too expensive. Having that initial consultation where they can sit down, kind of get a quick overview, get some questions answered, and get an idea as to what they cost, I think is definitely a benefit all around to make sure it's a great experience and it delivers what they're needing, what they're at the price point that they're able to afford on. Now,
and I assume it's for you, right? Like you've got a type of client who comes in and you're like, that is not a patentable idea. And you don't want to waste their time and you don't want to take advantage of them. And then there's another type of client who comes in and you're like, that's highly patentable. I need you to pay for a search. Then this is roughly how many hours I think it's going to take to draft a utility patent for you. And this will be roughly how many hours I think it'll take to prosecute. And so it's amazing how similar our method is to running an IP law firm. And in fact, what we see ourselves as like an engineering firm on steroids. We're an engineering firm first that happens to have this big giant factory behind me. And then behind this factory is 35 more factories in Vietnam, China, and Taiwan that help someone scale up. So this is the tip of the iceberg. And all of this isn't, I'm not just here to promote my company. I want to explain why I did this. Hardware was too damn hard. and it shouldn't be. And we all know investors are terrified, particularly American investors are terrified of hardware startups. But this world is still a hardware planet. And we need better ways of delivering liquid propane gas. We need better solar panels. We need, better roads, better bridges. And none of that is going to come out of the type of investor that is only looking for software startups in Silicon Valley. So all of this comes out of a deep passion and obsession to make hardware easy.
No, I think that is a great place to come at it. And I totally agree. I mean, there is a place for software, there's a place for hardware, there's a place for mechanical, and to try and, there's plenty of products and services and other things that are certainly hardware reliant, yet it's one that people tend to get scared off on just because of the fear of the cost it's going to take to or do a business in that realm. And I think it's great that you guys are providing an avenue to address that. So well, look, we're reaching towards the end of the podcast. We have so many more things that we could chat on. So we'll have to have you on maybe to one of our sister podcasts in the future and continue to explore your journey. But for today's episode, I always like to wrap up each episode with one question. So we'll jump to that now, which is within your industry, and it may have already been what you just chatted about, but I'll ask the same question anyway. Within your industry, what is the biggest myth and why is it wrong?
Biggest myth is, I'll pivot away from what I previously said. We'll say this is the second biggest myth. The first biggest myth is hardware has to be hard. And hopefully we've solved that. The second biggest myth is that inventions come from engineers. And I don't understand why the average person thinks that. The reality is inventions come from people who are angry. That's where they come from. Someone who has dealt with a problem in their industry, and they're so frustrated that this sticky spot, this Velcro-like thing is in their path, that they've decided to invent something to work their way through that. That's where inventions come from. And the problem with that is that means they're both the most qualified and least qualified to bring it to market. They're the most qualified because they're a subject matter expert and they know exactly what the customer needs. But the moment they need to turn that into a physical thing, they need a mechanical engineer and an electrical engineer and a software. They need a coder. They need someone who knows the difference between firmware and apps. And most of the people that are out there who can provide those services are out to screw you. And so it's really, really hard for that person who has this crazy idea in the back of their head to actually get that to market, even though they're the most qualified. And usually someone is saying to them, you shouldn't be doing this. You didn't get a degree in engineering. And the reality is that they're exactly the person who should be doing it. They should just have engineers that are willing to support them.
No, I think that that's a great myth to dispel. And I like hey, I'm an engineer by undergraduate, by training, but I also am an attorney. I've done other startups. And I think that, there's a lot of skill sets and a lot of the clients we work with, it's not always the engineer. And sometimes you have the engineer that helps you to implement the idea or figure out how to build it. But it doesn't mean that you have to be the engineer in order to start the business, to build it, to understand it, and to be successful at it. So I think that's some great myths to dispel and definitely some great takeaways. So, well, now as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, if they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
All they got to do is Google our company name, Evansworks, and that's spelled EVANSWERKS. It's the German spelling. And you'll come across our website, evansworks.com. You can book an appointment with us right on the website. You can email me personally at justin.evans@evansworks.com. You'll find us on YouTube. You'll find us on Instagram. You'll find us on Facebook.
Awesome. Well, definitely plenty of great ways to connect, and certainly invite people to reach out, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Justin, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now,
I love being on your show and I love your business.
Absolutely. Now it's been a fun and a pleasure to have you on. And for now, all of you that are listeners, to help us to share this expertise with even more startups and small businesses, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach those businesses to help them along their journey. And on that note, if you ever need help along your journey with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Justin, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
All right. Bye, sir.